Okay, recording my speech. Okay. You know that feeling you get when you want something so badly that you might die without it? What if it was something so important that you couldn't live without it? Today, at least 20 people on the organ transplant list have died waiting. Could you imagine living every day waiting by the phone for that one phone call, the one that could change your life forever? I know I couldn't. And every 10 minutes, another person is living like this. Every 10 minutes, someone else is added to the organ recipient list. As of April of 2018, 114 people were on the waiting list. They can wait months, years, and even decades before receiving the organ they need to live, and that isn't even the worst part. At least 2,000 of those people are children that have not yet had a chance to live their life. But what if you could change that? What if you could be the difference between life and death for a person? Today, I hope to explain the process of organ donation, the myths and facts of organ donation, and how to sign up for it. A double lung transplant recipient once stated, "My experience isn't that organ donation isn't on your radar unless it becomes personal, but it can get personal very fast. Ask my family and my friends." Every day, at least 20 people die waiting for an organ. According to organdonor.gov, 95% of Americans support organ donation, but only 54% are actually on the registered list. That means that about 138 million Americans are registered donors, but only 1 in 3 die in a way that allows for the organ donation. Organ donation is giving someone the gift of life. Do you have any idea how these people live every day waiting? Those that are in need are in pain, they feel scared and helpless, and are fighting to save their life. They may need a wheelchair just to get around, or maybe from weakness, or they can get too worn out from walking. According to healthtalk.org, some recipients describe being very breathless, tired, and weak for several years before the transplant and needed oxygen to help them breathe. There is a long process to organ donation. You don't just show up in the ER after an accident and declare dead when the doctors see you are an organ donor. Absolutely everything is done to save your life. No one knows that you're an organ donor until you are declared brain dead. They only look into that status then. That's when they call the organ procurement agency. According to an article on understanding brain death occurs when a person has an irreversible, catastrophic brain injury, which causes total cessation of all brain function in the upper brain structure and the brain stem. A person is considered in a coma or in any vegetated state still has some brain activity. There are a lot of tests that are performed to determine brain death. In fact, those who are organ donors actually go through more tests to determine brain death than those who aren't, after the doctors already think they're dead. This is no charge to the family, and only once brain death is declared do they call the organ procurement agency. A representative is then sent to speak to the family regarding the process. One of the reasons for lack of organ donors is fear. Tara Parker Pope of the New York Times stated, 23% fear that they aren't healthy enough or are too old. 50% believe that doctors won't work as hard to save them. 44% believe there's a black market for organ donors, and 57% question whether or not they can recover from brain death. You are never too young or too old to be an organ donor. In 2016, there was a woman from Scotland who was 107 years old and donated her corneas. The team of doctors that work to save your life are completely different than the team of doctors performing the actual transplant. No one will be declared dead without specific tests done to prove it. Donate Life chairwoman Sarah Pace stated, "People are reassured that everything will be done to save their lives after an accident when they understand that the doctors who treat them have nothing to do with the transplant process." The National Organ Transplant Act of 1984 put a ban on selling organs. There's still a black market out there, but it's highly unlikely in the United States. Myth: my family will have to pay for the cost of donation. Fact: there's no cost to the donating family. A huge concern for people is having to pay for the cost of medical services during the period of organ donation. The only thing the family will need to pay for is funeral costs and any tests done prior to the declaration of death. The cost of care is covered while the patient is in critical care on a ventilator. Living donors have no cost for the surgery or hospital stay. That is all paid for by the recipient's health insurance. Donors can even inquire about places for their family to stay because some hospitals offer a low cost or free house. Some follow-up expenses may not be covered, but most are. And your health insurance should not be affected whatsoever. According to the National Kidney Foundation, the Affordable Care Act has made it illegal for health insurance companies to refuse to cover you or charge you more because you have a pre-existing condition. Myth: you have to be declared dead to become an organ donor. Fact: living donors can donate a kidney, part of their liver, lobe of a lung, portion of their intestines or pancreas, or even your uterus. The heart can even be considered a living donor, which is only possible through a process called a domino transplant. That is when a patient receives a heart-lung transplant from a deceased donor and his or her lung goes to somebody that needs it more. And that is only done when the physicians determine that the deceased donor's lungs will function best if they are used in conjunction with the heart. Becoming a living donor is strictly voluntary and cannot be forced on anyone. It can have a positive impact on a person's life knowing they saved another. And another positive is getting to spend more time with a loved one and giving them a better quality of life. The big question is, why should you be an organ donor? How will that benefit you? Be aware that at least 10 people are put on the waiting list every day. You could save a life and help save another by bumping them up in line. If you're considered brain dead, then you could save up to 8 lives. Or you could donate as a living donor and help to increase another person's quality of life. The best time to decide about organ donation is now. It takes 2 minutes, it's easy and charitable. All you have to do is go online to one of many websites to register, or if you want to do it in person, you could go to the DMV. I strongly urge you to reconsider becoming an organ donor if you haven't already. This doesn't change anything about your life right now. I'll leave you with a quote from the United Network for Organ Sharing, or UNOS. Without the organ donor, there's no story, no hope, no transplant. But when there's an organ, life springs from death, sorrow turns to hope, and a terrible loss becomes a gift.